seeing that? I gotcha. Okay. I assume everybody can see the title screen. Yes. Okay. And really, what I want to talk about is sort of three parts. First of all, what is Clubfoot? Secondly, what's the gold standard for correcting this problem? And then Rotary's involvement and what things Rotary can do to help out. These are some examples of Clubfoot from different countries around the world. As it says here, it's the most common lower extremity birth defect in the world. It occurs in approximately 1 in every 750 live births around the world. There's some ethnic group differences, but not much. So it's pretty much equally distributed in all countries around the world. That equates to about 200,000 cases a year, and some unknown number of children and adults who have never been treated who are trying to live with Clubfoot, like some of the examples you see here in the pictures. It's twice as common in males as in females. We don't understand why. And it occurs in both feet about half the time, and just one foot the rest of the time, the other 50% of the time. So you see here, it's a pretty big problem. It's a problem that it's kind of a hidden disability in the U.S., given the fact that we don't see anybody walking down the street or trying to get by with untreated Clubfoot in the U.S. because it gets treated almost all the time as infants, much like Pat's child. But that's not true in developing countries. If you go to Nigeria, Pakistan, a lot of Latin American countries, Asian countries, you'll see adults, adolescents struggling to get along, to walk somehow with their feet turned down and turned under, like you see here. There are also a lot of cases that you don't see in developing countries because they're squirreled away, given the stigma that oftentimes comes with having a child with a disability. Here's just some examples of what it would be like to try to get along with Clubfoot. Little guy Rilwin on the left is about 7 years old, we thought, when he came into the clinic. You can see the struggle he has walking. And the 10-year-old on the right, Octavia, is in Brazil. He seems to be doing a little better. Background on Rilwin in Nigeria, he was discovered by a couple medical students who were doing a outreach program in a small village, and they came across this young guy, little Rilwin, crawling around his grandmother's hut or grandmother's house, and discovered that his father had pretty much disowned him when he was born because of his club feet. And grandma took him in, and she had been raising him for 7 years. And he had so much difficulty walking on the uneven dirt surfaces, where he lived, that he basically crawled everywhere he needed to get. So he had big calluses on his knees. And it was interesting in the clinic when the doctor asked him to go from here to there, he just got down and started crawling. That was his method of transportation or locomotion. So that was not atypical in terms of a lot of low resource developing countries where something like Clubfoot is a major stigma and life-changing thing. I mentioned that it's in different countries and it's in all countries. And I know you can't see this slide, but the details, but the point is the incidence of Clubfoot depends upon birth rate, population birth rate, with some adjustment for infant mortality. So countries like India have upwards of 25 or 30,000 cases of Clubfoot every year. The U.S. has somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000, and you see on down the line as countries get smaller. Unfortunately, in many of the developing countries that are poorer with less of healthcare system, they have the higher birth rates. So it's a challenge basically everywhere. So what causes it? Why do you have Clubfoot? It's still a good bit of a mystery. It clearly has some genetic, there's some genetic aberration, some duplication of its gene somewhere in the limb bud development of a fetus. And you see on the top left picture here is a 18-week ultrasound and you can see that even at that stage, you can detect that there's a clubfoot. I don't know, Pat, if you knew it before your child was born, if they had clubfoot or not.
No, he was born in 1994, and it was a total shocker. Yeah,
okay.
and he only had one clubfoot, not both.
Okay. Yeah. So, but these days, at least in, again, high resource countries where ultrasound is pretty standard, it's these days it's almost always detected. Of course, not the situation in most of the world, and similar to Pat's experience, it's a big surprise and a shock. Ends up being oftentimes a major guilt trip for the mom, like, what did I do wrong? And in a lot of patriarchal societies where the male is the dominant figure, they have difficulty tolerating having a disabled child. And oftentimes, like with Rilwin, they get disowned, they get sent to an orphanage, they get misplaced somehow. What really happens is somewhere in the middle of pregnancy, at least it's manifest by the middle trimester, that a couple structures in the lower leg just stop developing. They just put on the brakes. There are three muscles in particular that are shorter and tighter, and a couple ligaments on the inside arch of the foot that just, for whatever reason, have a slowed development in the middle of pregnancy. The rest of the limb keeps growing, and as that happens, it just distorts the foot, and it looks like what you see here. And again, you see the muscles here on the right are sort of the difference between the normal leg and the clubfoot leg, and the discrepancy in the development of one of those three muscles that are sort of the problem. So clubfoot manifests itself as a foot deformity, but there's nothing wrong with the bones. It's not a foot problem per se. It's a attachment problem to the muscles and ligaments that control the foot. And again, you see some other explanations here. We get some. We never seem to be surprised by the explanations we get for why it happens. And you can imagine, in a low resource country with not a very high education level, people try to explain it, like, why my kid? I'm the only one I know, and that's a big comment all the time. My kid's the only one I know that has clubfoot, because 1 in 750 doesn't happen very often in a small village or a small town. So we get a lot of explanations. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the polio vaccine that gets blamed for clubfoot, which makes the polio program a little more challenging in some environments. Pat mentioned surgery, and surgery has its long-term challenges, and that is if the surgery is done at a very young age and is sort of a shotgun approach to rearranging the bones of the foot. And to do that, they need to sever a lot of ligaments and lengthen tendons and do a lot of other things at an early age. By the time the patient is in their late 20s and 30s, they develop a lot of arthritis and a lot of problems. So doing surgery on an infant under 1 year of age is almost always a disaster. And the internet, if you look at adults with clubfoot on the internet, you will find a large number of postings of individuals that really struggle with arthritis and fibrosis and other things. The older the child is when the surgery occurs, the less traumatic it becomes, but it's certainly something to look out for as an adult. Okay, so what's another way to fix it besides surgery, which was a standard for many, for decades, if not over 100 years? Along comes a Spanish immigrant doctor named Ignacio Ponseti. Has a very interesting history of being in the Spanish Civil War and being a refugee in Mexico, and eventually finding his way to Iowa. And he was given the assignment to study these adults that had issues with clubfoot, had surgery as infants, and he thought he thought he could find a better way to do it. And he developed what's called the Ponseti method of correcting clubfoot rather than the surgical method. And it's not too different from orthodontics in the sense of what does the orthodontist do if you have crooked teeth? They apply some steady force in a corrective direction, and gradually over time allow the tissues to reform. Well, what happens in the Ponseti method is there's a series of gentle manipulations in which the foot is moved in the direction of a more normal alignment in a very specific sequence, actually. And then a plaster cast is applied, and to hold that corrected or better position for a week or 10 days. After and that cast goes all the way up to the groin area to keep it from slipping off and to really grab the foot where it needs to be grabbed or held. And what happens then, after a week, you take that cast off, you do a little more stretching, a little more manipulation, usually only takes a few minutes, and then apply another cast. So you're gradually stepping towards a more normal alignment for the foot. And typically, after 4 to 6 casts, change weekly, clubfoot can be completely corrected. Now, if that particular case of clubfoot is more difficult, then it may take 6 or 8 or 10 casts. That may take longer. Sometimes it only takes 2 or 3 if it's a very, very mild case. So every case is a little different. Every foot is a little different. It's challenging, but on average, it works quite nicely after 4 to 6 cast changes. Here's a time lapse of 5 weeks, period over 5 weeks, in which this particular foot between casts, this is what it looked like. And you can see the sequence is a little strange, but that was sort of Dr. Ponseti's genius to figure out exactly how to align the bones and give them a chance to give these structures that were too tight and a chance to stretch out and to realign. And like orthodontics, the foot still wants to go back to the original position, the original genetic code that was in there. And it's important. I didn't win the lottery, exactly. It's important that that when the child sleeps and when they take naps, when they're relaxed, that the foot doesn't curl back up again. During the day, when they're active and being a terrible 2 or whatever they are, it's just fine. But when they're relaxed and sleeping is when the foot wants to turn in again and go back to the distorted position. So it's important that the kids who have their foot corrected keep it corrected by sleeping in something that looks like this, a pair of shoes with a bar that actually holds the feet turned out and somewhat up and prevents them from contracting again. I know you can all imagine what it's like to convince kids to go to bed with shoes on, but there are a lot of kids that think everybody goes to bed with shoes on because that's what they've always done. So parents, need to be a little coy about sleepy shoes as part of your pajamas and all that sort of stuff. And about almost 10 years ago now, we formed a nonprofit, sort of an offshoot of the group here, to develop inexpensive and high quality braces for use in developing countries. Since in this country, most braces that are high quality, state of the art, are $400, $500, $600, $700 items each one, and the kids need 2 or 3 a year as they grow. So that's way beyond what can be done in developing countries. So it's another story about this Clubfoot Solutions nonprofit. And you can imagine that in low resource countries, people do the best they can to develop these clubfoot braces and end up with leather that's kind of hard and stiff, and some cases use the bars made out of scrap reinforcing rod from a construction site, or a wooden paint stick, or whatever they can find. So we have a parallel effort along with our Rotarian group to try to get good braces to places where the kids have had their feet corrected but need to keep them corrected. The nice thing about the Ponseti method is that it can be done anywhere. I mean, what does it take? It takes a skilled practitioner, somebody that knows how to do the manipulation and mold the cast very precisely around little teeny feet. It takes plaster, which is about the most inexpensive medical supply you can imagine. It costs about $4 a roll in most African countries. And then it takes a decent brace to hold the foot corrected once it is corrected. And of course, it takes cooperation of the parents. It takes understanding on the part of the parents that this problem is fixable, where to go to get it fixed, and oftentimes need help with how to do that, how to travel to the clinics, how to provide for the other kids that are still at home, how to afford the plaster and the braces and so on. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So back in 2015, we had a group of Rotarians around here in Iowa who were familiar with the Ponseti method and were passionate about spreading this method to these 200,000 kids around the world, to get the message out that it's fixable and how to fix it, and to train people to do the work to correct clubfoot. So in 2015, we got approval from Rotary International to form the Rotary Action Group for Clubfoot, or RAG for Clubfoot. Everything needs an acronym, you know, so we have a RAG for Clubfoot. And these are just, this is a list. I think there are a couple more added to this list by now, but basically Rotary Action Groups are collections of Rotarians that have a passion about a particular problem and want to do what they can to correct it. The water and sanitation is the big one that we see a lot of PR about, and a lot of ads in the Rotarian magazine and such. But there are these other groups that again are focused on particular problems they want to do something about. So in this case, the purpose of this group is to mobilize Rotarians and help get this method, this Ponseti method, out to people who have kids born with clubfoot and need it to be treated. We also here had a group focused around Dr. Ponseti's work called the Ponseti International Association. And again, this is another group that mainly physicians and healthcare professionals who are busy training each other and promoting clubfoot. And that started back in 2006. We've been doing that here mainly out of the University of Iowa. Done a lot of things like hold international symposiums for doctors, provide clinical guidelines for health facilities, developed an international database with 100,000 or more patient records in it, try to influence different medical societies in different countries to pay attention to this method and to adopt it, and help start clinics. And but two of the big things that we've tried to do is public awareness, to inform people about clubfoot, and training, to train the healthcare providers to actually administer the technique. So what can Rotarians do? Okay, what is it that the Rotary Action Group for Clubfoot would like Rotarians around the world, 1.however million we've got, to help out with this cause? And these are a list of some of the things that we encourage Rotarians to do. First of all, raise public awareness about clubfoot and reduce the stigma associated, again, particularly in low resource countries, to get out the message that clubfoot's nobody's fault and that it's fixable and where to go to get it fixed. Support training of healthcare professionals through global grants, to assist the clinics and families with support, like I mentioned, transportation to and from the clinic. We have one of the biggest reasons that people drop out of treatment is it may take hours with a local minibus or whatever to get from your village to the medical center where there's a doctor who knows how to treat clubfoot. So, and then what do you do with the other kids, and where do you find some food, and then again, how do you afford plaster and braces? So those sort of nitty-gritty things are important and are often impediments to completing the treatment. And then share information about what Rotarians are doing on social media, websites, and so on. And then ultimately to get the government and the health officials in different countries to say, this is the standard, this is how we treat clubfoot. When somebody has appendicitis, we do this. When they have a ear infection, we do that. When they have clubfoot, we do this. And in many low resource countries, the health officials have a lot of other things to deal with, you know, malaria, diarrhea, pneumonia, other issues. So getting clubfoot on the radar screen of the healthcare systems is a challenge, and and oftentimes Rotarians are in position to facilitate that. Let me give you just 3 quick examples, and then I'll be done here in terms of things that that Rotarians can do. Some examples. One is promoting clubfoot awareness, as I mentioned, sort of the base thing to do. And about 10 or more years ago, we came up with the concept, or the RAG group came up with the concept of World Clubfoot Day. You know, there's World Hand Washing Day and World AIDS Day and World this day and World that day. How do you declare a World Day? Anybody have an idea? We didn't have an idea either. So we went to Wikipedia, and there's a list of World Days. And there was no World Day on June 3rd, which happened to be Dr. Ponsetti's birthday. So we said, okay, June 3rd is World Clubfoot Day, and we typed it into Wikipedia. And then, of course, sent out emails and information to everybody we knew and said, June 3rd is World Clubfoot Day. And it's probably one of the most effective things we've just serendipitously done, because people have latched onto it in all different places and used it as a focal point to promote the basic concepts of what is clubfoot, how do you treat it, and where do you go to get it treated. So you see examples here in Karachi, Pakistan, and Lima, Peru, and Bangladesh, and people have had piñata parties and parades and mini marathons and seminars and speeches and picnics, whatever it takes to again, to get some local media, to get some local attention, and to spread this message. So it's been really interesting, and to see how creative people in different places have been. Again, particularly usually parents or healthcare professionals who learn about and know about clubfoot and want to spread the word. The other big thing, one of the big things on our list of what Rotarians can do is support training, because if you don't have a healthcare provider who understands the Ponsetti technique, who has been trained to do the manipulations of these teeny little feet and put the cast on just right, then the rest of it doesn't make any sense, because you have to have somebody who can actually correct clubfoot. So there are different levels of training in terms of finding people who are interested, doctors, and again, developing countries who are busy with all sorts of things, find those few who will take the time and interest to learn this technique and to set up a little window, a little niche in their clinic to treat clubfoot every week. And then the main thing we do that are important are fellowship programs, where over a 2, 3, or 4 day period, a healthcare professional who wants to learn this technique works side by side with someone who knows it and trains them in a hands-on fashion. And then we have, visiting professors who come in and check on people and help them once they get started. And of course, in this day and age, we do a lot by distance education with problem cases and so on. The little guy on the bottom right here, this is in Thailand, where they're actually holding his feet up to the computer screen so that the doctors here in Iowa can give them some consultation on what to do with this particular little chubby guy's feet. And training is important. Here's one example, and we see, unfortunately, too many of these here at the university. This was a little guy at birth. You can see his feet were sort of classic or typical club feet. In the middle is what his one foot looked like after 11 casts applied by a doctor who taught himself the Ponsetti method. So you can not only reshape a foot for the good, you can also reshape a foot for the bad if you really don't know what you're doing when you start applying plaster cast to tiny little feet. Unfortunately, the same feet are on the right here after someone who's really skilled in this technique can overcome what you see here and actually end up with normal feet if have enough skill and enough patience to do that. Now, Rotary's been involved with clubfoot for quite a while. Back in 1999, this was a proposal put in by the Rotary Club of Barnaby, British Columbia, and the Rotary Club in Kampala, Uganda, to train 24 orthopedic assistants. These would be like physician's assistants in our country, 2 years of training, and to learn the Ponseti method and to set up clinical facilities in Uganda. And here you actually see the president of Rotary International back in 2004, I believe it is, who visited a couple of the clinics in Uganda to see how things were going, and they were quite successful. And today there are several dozen clinics still operating in Uganda to treat the kids born there with clubfoot. So Rotary actually got in on the action pretty early on, as soon as Dr. Ponseti's method became well known globally. And currently, what's going on? The RAG is basically the RAG, the Rotarian Action Group, is intended as sort of a matchmaker. We try to find situations where there's a need for training or other activities, but mainly training, and find clubs, usually in higher resource countries, that want to help out, and then work with them about putting in a global grant to Rotary International, to the Rotary Foundation, and see if they can initiate some training activities. I'll give you one example here, and that is what happened in Colombia. And here's the country of Colombia for those of you who may need a geography refresher. Here at the head of South America. And this is sort of the needs assessment we did as part of helping this grant get put together. We estimated there are about 800 new cases of clubfoot every year in the country of Colombia. How many untreated kids there are, or untreated adults there are, is unknown, but certainly hundreds, more likely thousands over the years, kids that were born, particularly in the rural areas, and were never treated and are trying to get along through life, like Rilwin or Octavia that I showed you. And we estimated that Colombia needed about 28 or 30 treatment providers, that if there were 28 or 30 places around the country where there was someone who could skillfully treat, apply the Ponseti method to correct clubfoot, that we could take care of those kids, every one of those kids in that country. What we know from experience after 15 years now is that once a healthcare provider, usually a physician, identifies clubfoot as something they want to specialize in, if they set aside one half a day a week, they can see one new patient every week. And if the patients are seen 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, so they dedicate a couple hours one afternoon or one morning to just clubfoot. They then on average treat about 50 patients a year. So one new patient every week, and with repeat visits and so on, they can treat 50 patients a year. So that's how we estimate how many treatment providers we're likely to need if they're strategically placed and available to take care of the problem in any given country. We thought it would take about 24 months to train these 28 or 30 providers, and the budget was $105,000, almost 106. And that was based on the fact that these physicians that we're going to train have to travel to a medical center, work with a trainer, an experienced provider, see a number of patients over 3, 4, or 5 days, enough that they can feel confident to go back to their own clinical setup and their own facility and begin treating patients. We got support for this project from 2 clubs here in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. The Marco Island Club kicked in some of their cash and district designated funds. The Rotary Club in Vail, Colorado had some interested people that also helped support the project. And then 2 of the host clubs in Colombia. And so together we came up with a budget of $106,000. Although if you know about the grants from Rotary Foundation, there's a lot of matching that goes on. And sometimes you only need to come up with about 25% of the money. That gets doubled at the district level and gets doubled again at the international level. So that worked out pretty good. These are some of the people involved in that project. Dr. Sri Medina on the left is a Rotarian and an orthopedic surgeon in Colombia. who was head of the project in Colombia and the training program. And Dr. Marquende is the main guy here at the university, who's done over 200 international trips in the last 10 years to train people around the world in this technique. And you see one of the trainings on the left, bottom left there, we have little rubber club feet that the doctors learn to manipulate and put plaster cast on. And then on the right, you see the lady in yellow there is Dr. Arana from Mexico. And we have a number in Latin America, we have a number of doctors who are willing to take a week off of their clinical responsibilities and go to another country to train aspiring practitioners of the Ponseti method. So here she's explaining some things to the trainees, as we call them, in Cartagena in September of 2018. So it takes an experienced trainer and some patience and multiple attempts at putting plaster on rubber club feet before they try it on a patient and see what it really feels like. And here's the mandatory group picture that you always have to have with the Rotarians, right? So this is the group in Bogota, the clubs that actually were major sponsors for the at their end for the project. Now, what's the payback? Okay, what do you get for $106,000? Well, this is how we kind of look at this. In Colombia, for example, that I put the red line under, we started out to train 28 orthopedists and ended up training 30 because a couple others just invited themselves and came to the training. And that turns out to be $3,500 per trainee, per doctor trained. But if each doctor is going to treat 50 patients a year and has a career of 20 years, each doctor is going to treat 1,000 patients over 20 years. Okay, and if we train 30 doctors for that much money, it means the training investment was $3.53 per life changed in terms of treating the kids. So it's about as cost-effective an expenditure as you can get in terms of actually impacting the lives of kids born with this issue anywhere actually. And you can see it's even cheaper in some places like the Dominican Republic, and depending on what it costs to transport the doctors and house them for a week and so on. So it's quite a return on investment in terms of life-changing experiences. And I'll mention one other example here in terms of just less involved or dramatic involvement in trying to help out. This was the 2017 March Rotarian magazine, where they always have the world roundup of what's going on in different places. And in this particular issue, they had one here on Nigeria in the red box. And if we look a little closer, that's a story about 3 clubs in Lagos, Nigeria, who pooled their money, came up with $13,000, and were able to provide treatment support, again, plaster, braces, transportation, whatever it took, for 210 children in the Lagos area. And Lagos is a city of whatever it is, 12 or 14 million people. And the treating doctor there was doctor on the top left there, Dr. Oluyinka Adegbahingbe. Took me a long time to learn to say that. But he was trained here at the university in 2007 and operates a clinic there. And then you see a typical patient being treated here at the teaching hospital in Lagos. So on the local level, with Rotarians in communities all over the world, we're trying to encourage the local clubs to say who in our area treats Clubfoot, and can we help? And can we help with simple things? In India, for example, some of the Rotarians just go to the clinics and entertain the siblings while the kids are being treated or waiting in the waiting room. They bring candy and entertainment and the clown and whatever it takes to facilitate treatment on the local level. It doesn't have to be highly expensive or complicated. Just provide whatever assistance is needed, as well as comfort to the parents and say, it's okay, your kid's going to be all right. This is going to work out. So here's our buddy Rilwin. You saw the before picture. Here he is just after he came out of the cast, only about 2 days. Now you can see he's not walking perfectly, but his feet are straight. They're flat on the floor. He's wearing his school uniform. He never went to school before. And as he walks and uses his feet, he's going to get stronger. He's going to build up those muscles. He'll get greater balance. Get a little camera shy, but certainly a whole different life from crawling around his grandma's hut. He can now go off to school with his 3 older siblings, and has a chance at least at a normal life. And then here's one of my favorites, Octavia. I told you 10-year-old Octavia. There he is on the right side. See the smile on his face. He's pretty happy to have some functioning feet compared to what he had before. And even at 10 years old, he's doing a lot better. And you can see that again, he's got a shot at a much better life, having his feet straightened out with the Ponseti method. So the goal, of course, is a world without clubfoot disability. Take care of these kids. If we have 200,000 a year for the next 10 years, that's 2 million kids are going to be born with clubfoot over the next 10 years. What's it going to take? We think it will take about 4,000 trained treatment providers strategically placed around the world, and then it will take some good braces to maintain the correction once the feet are straightened out, and that we really need to get at the local level support and organization for sustainable clinics and sustainable part of the health system, so that this is just the standard care that everybody gets. If you're interested in finding more out about it, you can check out ragforclubfoot.org. You could become a member of RAG for $25 and get the newsletter and help support what's going on. Here's a website for the Ponseti International Association here in Iowa, and Clubfoot Solutions is the brace nonprofit that I mentioned briefly. And if you really, really want to know more about Dr. Ponseti and his life story, I wrote this book a couple years ago, and I'd be happy to send you a copy if you email me, or you can get one at Amazon or a bookstore or at Ice Cube Press. Kind of tells the whole story of how Dr. Ponseti got involved in this, and the 40-year effort he made to get his method accepted by the medical community here in the U.S. before it could be spread to the rest of the world. So I will pipe down for now and be happy to take any questions or any comments that you have about Clubfoot or Ponseti method or the RAG.
I definitely have questions. How many countries have you been to, you personally? To teach
personally, upwards of 40, I think. But not all of them with Clubfoot, but I don't know, 20 or 25 with Clubfoot. But I don't treat anybody's feet. I've never fixed a kid's foot. I'm an organizer, and try to put people together to do things. So that's been my role, at least with the Ponseti International Association and now with the RAG, and that is facilitate the action instead of and not actually do it. I haven't been a practicing clinical therapist for quite a while, but I see I'm more of a big picture, write grants, figure out budgets, and talk to people like your group to get them enthusiastic about helping out. Try to be a matchmaker.
That's wonderful. Is it preventable? Like through diet? Like I've heard folic acid is very important to the prevention of clubfoot. Is that true?
Probably not. There are lots of studies. I think there's some evidence that heavy smoking by the mother might have some influence, but very slight. And it's hard to believe, but in this day and age, it's still a real genetic puzzle. You would think that you can figure out the genes for sickle cell anemia, and you can figure out the genes for all sorts of things, but there are really 3 or 4 really good conflicting studies about which genes influence clubfoot. So it's and unfortunately, it's a rare enough condition that the federal government hasn't put a lot of resources into tracking it down. You know, by definition, a rare disease is anything that that affects fewer than 200,000 people in the U.S. And you know, with all the people over the years who've had clubfoot, it's added up to more than that, and it just doesn't come up on the priority list for the National Institutes of Health or other people. So there have been some people have done, you know, there are good research studies, but it's been a mystery. It's the latest is it's something to do with a duplication of a couple genes. So it's not a single gene thing. It's not freckles or red hair or you know, the kind of things that we usually think of handed down from one generation to the next. It's a little more complex than that. I equate it to a slot machine. You know, you pull the handle and all the wheels go around, and every once in a while they line up the same and you win something. You know, I think it's a matter of there are normal variations on different genes, and once in a while, once out every 750 times, somebody pulls the gene handle, and those aberrations, those common aberrations, happen to line up and influence one another, and you come out with a clubfoot. There certainly is a genetic predisposition. If you have parents that have clubfoot, a grandparent that has clubfoot, you have a 3% increased risk of clubfoot. There are families that have 5 and 6 kids with clubfoot in them, and we've got a family here in Dubuque, Iowa, with 7 blood relatives with clubfoot, and we've tested all their genes and still can't unscramble what it is that's common to all of their genetic code to account for the clubfoot. So hopefully soon we're going to crack it, because you know, genetic research tools get better all the time, but it's a challenge. I'll tell you the other question that I often get, and probably some of you are thinking of, is how old can a kid be? How old can a person be when you still treat them? I mean, the ideal, of course, is to treat them as infants, because then they have the whole life, you know, with disability free. Mm-hmm. Dr. Ponsetti used to think, and I had the privilege of working with Dr. Ponsetti for a couple of years. Yeah, he used to think that if you didn't treat it by age 2, it probably wouldn't work, because the bones were already developing and things were set, you know, being more established. Once a lot of doctors were trained in the Ponsetti method from other countries, and they went back to their home country, and word's out that, you know, Dr. Sepulveda in Chile is treating clubfoot, and you have a kid who's 10 years old who has clubfoot, what mother wouldn't take their kid there and say, "Can you fix my kid?" You know, so, and the doctors say, "Well, I don't know, but we'll try." You know, and what we learned from the doctors in developing countries is there's no upper limit on this. You know, there are teenagers. There's a woman in the Philippines who's 22 years old, who'd been in a wheelchair for years, and it took like 6 months of cast and such, but they got her feet turned around, and she got up from her wheelchair, and away she goes. So you know, the human body is so resilient, and plastic is a medical term. It doesn't sound medical, but there's plasticity in the system, in which if you apply enough the forces in the right direction and consistently, you can actually get things to reform in a normal fashion. I mean, it's how you get bones to heal, right? I mean, you fracture your leg, they put it in a cast, and they give it time, and it grows back together. Well, it's kind of the same thing with, you know, adults with you know, orthodontics. You can get your teeth straightened as an adult. It just takes a little longer. So the body can adjust. So the sky's the limit almost, in terms of how old a patient could be and still get their feet straightened out.
Very cool. You also had a slide about, oh, I'm sorry, Renee, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to reference a slide. I saw that, if I'm not mistaken, it's linked to chronic heart disease, like later on in life. Is that what you stated up there?
No, what that slide said was that
later on in life.
Yeah, yeah. There's a study in St. Louis was done in 2004, actually, in which they looked at adults who had had surgery as infants. So the adults were in their early 30s on average, and they gave them a survey on the quality of life. Can you walk upstairs? Can you walk a mile? Can you, do all the quality of life sorts of issues? A standard burden of disease questionnaire, and the scores came out similar to adults who had Parkinson's disease or renal failure or chronic heart disease. So it's just from a quality of life point of view and a disability point of view, they were trying to document how well these individuals were doing. So, but it's not linked to. There's no link to heart disease. Although you look on the internet, you'll find all sorts of stuff. It's linked with different genetic disorders, trisomy disorders, and all sorts of other things. And it's not. There is a classification of clubfoot called syndromic clubfoot, and that's a group that's about 6 or 8% of clubfoot cases that are secondary to another problem. So if you have spina bifida, you have arthrogryposis, you have other more systemic developmental problem. Also having clubfoot is not uncommon, but it's not the main problem, and oftentimes nobody treats it because if you're already wheelchair bound because you have spina bifida or one of these other developmental disorders, you put an adaptive shoe on or something and just let it go. So sometimes people get that all inverted. They think, oh well, the clubfoot gives you these other problems. It's the other way around. These other larger health issues, secondarily, because they affect joints and muscles and tendons and everything, develop the appearance of clubfoot, but it's not primary clubfoot. The term often used is congenital clubfoot, meaning you're born with it, and that's all you have. It's an isolated clubfoot issue. But kids with cerebral palsy and other issues oftentimes have feet that look like clubfoot. Good catch. You were paying attention. That's good.
That was my question too. I saw the Parkinson's thing on there, so I didn't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I went by that pretty quickly. I'll have to slow down a little bit.
That's okay. Well, that was really wonderful. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Well, I think you have my email address and such and contact information. If I can be of any help, or if you want to, just check out the website for the RAG for Clubfoot. There's a lot of information there about Dr. Ponseti, about Clubfoot, about the activities of RAG, the different countries that are associated with different projects, and any other ideas you have about how to help out, or you want to throw a picnic on World Clubfoot Day or something, why we'd be happy to have you do that. It's interesting. I mean, even in this group of What Are You 6, that Pat, that you have a kid with clubfoot. I give a talk to a group of 40 or 50 people. First thing I do is say, anybody in this group have clubfoot, have a family member or relative, or know somebody with clubfoot, and I've yet to come across a group where somebody didn't raise their hand. So it's below the radar screen. It gets taken care of at an early age, but it's out there, and is certainly out there and much more manifest in the rest of the world. Well, thanks for your attention. It's been good. And
Roy Aikman, the quarterback, had 2 club feet.
Right, Todd Aikman had 2 clubfoot. He actually wrote a children's book.
He did. I have it.
You have his children's book? This one.
Yes. Yeah. I have that book, and he signed it for my son, but and they just casted him. He never had surgery.
Right. And Krista Yamaguchi was born with clubfoot.
Really?
Her physical therapist told her to take up ice skating to strengthen her ankles after she had her clubfoot fixed. So you can thank her Clubfoot for getting into ice skating to get her to a gold medal winner.
Good advice.
Yeah. And if you want to, for some fun, Google famous people with Clubfoot, and
Okay.
you'll be surprised. Charles Woodson, Hall of Fame football player.
Yeah.
Radar O'Reilly on MASH was head football. Angelina Jolie was born with a Clubfoot. Yeah, check it out. The famous people with Clubfoot. They're more than you think, and it's a tribute to the non-surgical methods and to the fact that we fortunately live in a country where this can get fixed and people can go on to lead a normal life. And when we try to track down some of Dr. Ponsetti's patients, Dr. Ponsetti had this figured out in the 1950s, and he spent 40 years arguing with the medical community to adapt his method, and they just ignored it completely. But we have patients who were treated. We have one woman I interviewed last year who was treated in June of 1948 by Dr. Ponsetti. And she's 70 some years old now, retired. She kayaks and swims and bikes and does all sorts of stuff and has had a normal life for her whole time. And I've dozens of those people, and they're hard to find because they're just normal citizens. They're not on the internet saying, "Help me, my foot hurts." They're just off, doing normal things. So it's an interesting condition, and it's quite a contrast of people who are treated properly and those who maybe not.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
We sure do appreciate everything you did and everything you've done and your time today. And we're going to forego Happy Bucks today for next time when we meet in person. So, but you have this recording. We'll put it out on your email, and that way, if you want to go back and ask questions or join that RAG group, please do go, because he's listed all of those websites and ways to get a hold of him and ways to look into that RAG group. So at
Okay.
this time,
Yeah, everybody have a great day.
goodbye and have a great day, and our meeting is adjourned. Bye, guys.